Okay, so I think I'm going to start with an apology because it's nearly lunchtime and I'm only just starting on this video right now. I have to admit, I'm feeling a bit worn down by this case. Not because of the lack of information from the Mounties, not because of the not knowing, but because of all the ridiculous speculation that's going on and all the clickbait titles that are being put out on YouTube. It just breaks my heart to see creators like Joseph Morris spreading clickbait rumours just to make money out of this case. And to see people coming out of the woodworks claiming to be connected to the family in some way with stories that just don't hold up to logic. And I worry that this is going to become another one of those cases like Summerwell's, like Sebastian Rogers, where so many of the credible creators end up walking away from covering it because it turns into a circus. You know, it turns into more of a fan fiction story than actual facts. So, yeah, I am feeling a bit worn down by all the BS that's out there on this case. I've noticed that when it comes to this interview and the Belinda Gray interview, there's far fewer videos out there that are discussing these than there are discussing unverified information. So it's possible that already many of the really good credible creators are turning their back on this case and going, yeah, I had enough. And it's going to be a shame if it comes to that. Now, I will be working on a video this week looking at verified information. Everything that we know so far in this case that is factual. Because I think it is time that we stopped and actually had a look at what we know, as opposed to running around sharing baseless rumours. Now, with that said, if you are wanting to be kept up to date with factual information on this case, and you're not concerned with rumours, then please click the subscribe button if you have not done so already. Because that is all you will be getting here on this channel, factual information. I will share my opinion based on known facts. I will do analyses of interviews, but I'm not going to share rumours and speculation. And in terms of the theories that are flying around, my suggestion is this, and that is to stick with the principle of KISS, which is keep it simple, stupid. If there is a theory that you hear that on its own doesn't stand, doesn't meet the test of logic, and needs additional theories added to it to be able to stand the test of logic, and even then maybe needs even more theories added to it to still stand the test of logic, chances are it's complete utter BS. Now, moving on to this interview. So this is part 2 of my analysis, my breakdown of the most recent interview that was done by Daniel Martell with CBC News. If you haven't caught part 1, I would suggest that you go and check it out, because I think there is a lot of valuable information that has come out in this interview. On the surface, it may not seem so, but when you start to really pay attention to what's going on with body language and what is actually being said, there's a lot to unpack. Now, I've only had a really brief look at the second half of this interview, but it does look to me like there is certainly a lot of interesting things to discuss. So on that note, let's just jump straight in.
Do you know if Malaya has taken one?
I don't know if I can say it, but I will anyway. Yes, she did take one.
Okay, she took one. Do you know the result?
No. RCMP wouldn't let tell me I asked.
So this is quite interesting. So the question was, do you know if Malaya took a polygraph test? And he says, I don't know if I can say, but I will anyway, yeah. What's the motivation here? He would know full well whether or not he is allowed to say if Malaya did a polygraph test or not. This is nothing more than an attempt to manipulate the audience. He has, from day one, been setting himself up as the hero in the whole situation, while at the same time very subtly gaslighting Malaya. So he starts out originally with the running through the woods ahead of the helicopters and the drones and running through waist-deep water searching for these children. And he makes sure to remind people that he's the one that stuck around. He's the one that volunteered to do a polygraph test. He offered for them to take his phone. He handed over his phone. And the gaslighting, I'm the one who's out here searching. I'm the one who stuck around. I'm the one who's speaking on behalf of the kids. And then you get the statements relating to Malaya. So in terms of seeing his children, he basically leaves out little important bits of information. So he, in early interviews, talks about going to see CPS so that he can see Meadow, giving people the impression, and it worked, that CPS had taken custody of Meadow, when in actual fact Meadow is with her mother, and that is verified information. But people got so confused because of the way that Daniel said it, which made people believe that Meadow had been taken from both of them. You also get the comment of he wants people to stop talking about Malaya because of the effect on her mental health and the effect on Meadow, which of course blew his earlier statement out of the water, because then people realised that Meadow actually was with Malaya. And it's just been continual things like that, where he has very subtly given people ideas relating to Malaya, so that he's still the good guy. He's not bad-mouthing her. He's just saying things that the power of suggestion. And this is the same thing. He wants to make sure that people know that Malaya did a polygraph test. But at the same time, he doesn't want to appear too eager to point it out. So he wants to make it sound like he's just trying to protect her, or he's just trying to protect the investigation. So, shh, don't tell anyone. But yeah, Malaya did have to do one. And you do see that telltale lift of the corners of his mouth straight after he says, well, but I will anyway, yeah. Because the goal here is again to shift people's focus onto Malaya and to shine her or to show her in a bad light. Don't forget, he has repeatedly claimed that he asked to do a polygraph test. So, not that he had to do one, but he asked to do one. Just to show people how genuine he is. So, what is being implied here is that while he only did one because he asked to do one, Malaya had to do one because she's a suspect in the case. It's very subtle, but there is manipulation going on here. By saying, I don't know if I can say, he is intentionally dramatising the fact that Malaya did a polygraph test. He wants people to focus on that fact. We heard in the latest release from the Mounties that yes, they had done a number of polygraph tests. So, had he been not wishing to shine the spotlight on Malaya, he could have simply said, well, they actually did a number of polygraph tests with people who were connected directly to our family. You know, he could have downplayed it and basically highlighted the fact that Malaya would have been one of a number of people doing polygraph tests. Quite possibly his own mother may have been one of the people doing a polygraph test, since apparently she lived on the property. But he doesn't do that. He highlights. She's asked him, did Malaya have to do a test? And he turns it into an opportunity to gaslight. It's subtle, but he takes every opportunity he can to gaslight Malaya and to very carefully suggest to people that they should be focusing on her. I also very strongly suspect, based on his obsession with what's being said online, that he is at least one of the identities who is posting on Facebook and is using that also to push the narrative against Malaya. Now, she asks him, do you know the results of Malaya's polygraph test? And his response is actually quite significant, and I will explain why in just a moment. So he responds with that the RCMP wouldn't allow or weren't allowed to tell him. But he did ask. And as he is saying that, what you see is, again, a bit of jiggling in the legs, a bit of squeezing with the hands, bit of movement with the hands. He's showing some agitation. So my question to you is, why should it matter to him what the results were of Malaya's polygraph test? Here's the thing that a lot of people have forgotten in the scramble to jump on board all the stories that have been put out there. The accounts that we had from both Malaya and Daniel at the very beginning, when these children first went missing, was that they were both together with Meadow at the time that Lily and Jack went missing. So, in terms of polygraph tests, here's the thing. According to Daniel, he's got nothing to hide. He requested a polygraph test to prove that he's got nothing to hide. He claims that he passed the polygraph test, implying that he had nothing to do with the disappearance of these children. Now, if him and Malaya were together when the children disappeared, and he is so very confident of his own innocence, so very confident that he would pass a polygraph test because he had nothing to do with it, then why would he need to ask about the results of Malaya's polygraph test? Because if he had nothing to do with it, and they were both together when the children went missing, then logically, Malaya had nothing to do with it either. Meaning that her polygraph test would have come up all clear if his did. He wouldn't be concerned. He wouldn't be showing agitation with his body language over the fact that he couldn't find out how she went in her polygraph test. So why, ask the Mounties, if she passed her polygraph test, why be agitated because he can't find out if she passed her polygraph test? That to me points to only one thing. He's worried that she may not have passed her polygraph test. That maybe she got caught out lying about something. Or alternately, maybe she passed her polygraph test because she was being entirely truthful about something. Because the thing is, while he's been busily trying to lay the blame on Malaya, if she failed her polygraph test and was lying about what happened to the children, then that could reflect back on him. Basically, given that we are supposed to believe that him and Malaya were both together when the children went missing, if he's concerned about how Malaya went in the polygraph test, that to me says he knows that they're not guilt-free. And he's concerned that she may have actually ratted them both out. He's concerned that she may have shared information with the Mounties that's going to incriminate him. Given that we have a situation here where, based on their own testimonies, both of them are involved or neither of them are involved, his concern, his anxiety over how Malaya went in her polygraph test is extremely revealing. In a nutshell, it says these two have something to hide, and he doesn't want Malaya to mess up and tell the Mounties what that is.
You said you feel like everyone in the world wants to know what happened to Lily and Jack.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think this is getting so much attention?
Well, just the mysterious and nature of everything and how strange everything is. The RCMP You know, I mean, they have to keep a tight lip on everything, but there's a lot more that meets the eye with the case.
So she asks the question, why do you think everyone in the world wants to know what happened to Lily and Jack? You know, why is there so much attention on this case? Now, I'm just going to say, before we go into what he said, the thing that drew me to this case, I first came across it on Paula's channel, Plunder True Crime. And I got as far into it as her playing an interview with Daniel. And straight away, my blood ran cold and I said, these kids are gone. I just saw red flags immediately in his body language. And I was literally sitting there saying out loud, no, no, no. It just gave me bad vibes, and I think a lot of people got drawn into this case for similar reasons. They got drawn into this case because these beautiful children were missing and both parents seemed to be lying. Not that we should be referring to Daniel as a parent, but both custodial figures appeared to be lying. Now, first of all, I think that Daniel's response definitely shows us that he is paying very close attention to everything that is being said in the media and also everything that is being said in social media. Because we have heard, we've seen in articles, we've heard in news reports, the comments of it being a somewhat mysterious case of these children just vanishing. But he struggles to get this sentence out. It's not a mystery to him. So for him, this sentence is a lie. I've mentioned this previously. The brain does not like to lie, and it will do things to try and prevent you from doing so. It gives clues. It might be that the body language doesn't match what is being said in terms of the verbal language. Or, as is the case here, there is difficulty with finishing the sentence. You may notice a change in the cadence, and you certainly will if the sentence is broken up like this. So we get, well, just the pause. He says mysterious and then another pause. And he's shaking his head while he's saying this. To him, it's not a mystery. And in that pause, he clenches his lips. His brain is saying, careful what you say here. He's basically lying. This is no mystery to him. And then he goes, nature of everything. And how strange everything is. And throughout this statement, he's shaking his head. It's not strange, there's a simple answer, basically, is what I'm taking away from his body language. Now, the next bit that he says, you can see his eyes are going from side to side. He's thinking really hard about what to say here. He's not quite sure what to say. And he says the RCMP, so again, we've lost the cadence. You don't have the fluency in the language. He's stalling while he figures out what to say here. They have to keep a tight lip on everything. And he nods there. So he knows that they're keeping a tight lip or tight lid on everything. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is something they've told him personally on a number of occasions. And then he throws in, There's a lot more that meets the eye with the case. That meets the eye. This was a statement that he quickly came up with. You could see him thinking, trying to figure out what to say. What's interesting here is that as he's finishing saying that, he's shaking his head, and then after he finishes saying it, he nods his head. So you're seeing inconsistency in his body language, but also the body language isn't lining up with the speech. You would expect that nod if he was actually saying, this truly is the case. You would expect that to be in line with the speech, not come up after it. That's always a red flag. And it appears to me that basically his body language has given him away a little bit with the shaking the head, and at the last minute he's remembered the need to demonstrate what he's saying using body language. And I do believe that, because what we've seen in terms of progression throughout the interviews that he's done, this interview is different because he seems to have gone back to the point of his body language is giving him away. But what we've seen is that in the early interviews, while he still was controlling his body language to some extent, and we were really only seeing sort of micro movements as opposed to really clear body language that you would normally expect to see, it appears that he has perhaps paid attention to what's been said online, because in later interviews you can see him really trying to control any sort of body language to the point where there's almost no movement occurring. But, you can only do that so much because you can't cheat your brain, basically. Now, we can all agree there definitely is more to this case. And I would say that he definitely knows that there is more to this case. So why the shaking the head when he's saying that? Because it seems to me the intention of what he was saying here doesn't actually match what he's actually saying. And I know I've said that in a kind of a backwards kind of way, but what I mean is that by saying there's a lot more that meets the eye here, he's not trying to say that, I know that there's more here, and, I'm deeply involved in all this. What he is trying to imply, and what he wants people to take on board there, is that basically he has inside knowledge. And this inside knowledge has come directly from the Mounties, which of course, again, implies that he had nothing to do with it. He has made this statement regarding the Mounties, followed by there's more than meets the eye, because he wants, again, to direct attention away from him by implying that he knows so much more about the actual investigation. That gives the suggestion that, well, he's not a suspect because they're sharing investigative secrets with him. That's why we're getting the shake of the head, because the statement is actually deceptive in its intention. He has made that statement directly in reference to the Mounties, directly in reference to them keeping a tight lip for the express purpose of convincing people that, yep, he knows all this background, all this secret information that the public doesn't know because the Mounties trust him that much. And let's be realistic here, in a case like this, when nobody has been cleared, there's no way known that the Mounties will have shared any investigative information with this guy.
Is there something that you think the public doesn't know that you can share, that you want the public to know?
That's a hard one because I don't want to impede the investigation in any way. It is still a missing persons investigation. It hasn't pivoted to any type of criminal investigation.
So she asks him, is this something that you think the public doesn't know that you want the public to know? And you get a big sigh from him. And the first response is, that's a hard one because I don't want to impede the investigation in any way. He's basically just told the public something that he wants them to know, but in a somewhat manipulative way. He's doubling down on this notion that he knows everything that's going on in the investigation. He knows what the actual situation is. They're keeping him up to date on everything. He's trying to give the impression that he's the good guy and they're clearly not looking at him because, hey, they're sharing all this investigative information with him. So he's actually already responded to her question. But that's just the beginning. Again, when he continues to speak, he struggles to get the sentence out in full. It is still and he's trying to say missing, but it comes out like mercy. So it is still a missing person investigation. And as he says missing person investigation, he closes his eyes. He doesn't want the interviewer to see the truth. When someone is trying to hide something, when someone is lying, it's not uncommon to see them close their eyes. I mean, just think back to when you were a kid and you did something wrong and your parents would say, okay, look me in the eyes and tell me you didn't do this. It's such a simple lie detecting strategy that it's been passed down through generations of families, and it's something that parents still use today. So him closing his eyes as he says that it's still a missing person investigation shows us that actually that's not really the truth. As does, of course, the fact that he's struggling to even get that sentence out. He says it hasn't pivoted to any type of criminal investigation. And he is shaking his head as he's saying that. Although it's only when he says it hasn't pivoted. To me, that seems to be an indication that actually he knows that it has actually pivoted to a criminal investigation. And we know, based on what the Mounties have said, that they are. While they are saying they are still covering all bases, the information that they have given very strongly suggests that it is now pivoted to a criminal investigation. They're not searching in the woods anymore. They're not putting out any information with regards to a possible abduction. They've done multiple polygraph tests. They're using behaviour analysts, speech analysts. They're using their criminal investigative team. They haven't directly said, yes, it's a criminal investigation now, but they don't need to because they've made it pretty clear in their description of what resources they are using with the investigation, in their description of how they are now investigating, meaning that they are no longer searching. And of course, their continued silence definitely points towards a criminal investigation. Had they uncovered anything that may point towards an abduction, then by now they would actually be telling the public about this. They would be sharing this information if they believed that the children had been abducted in an effort to get information that would help them get the children back. I mean, logically, if there was any chance that the children were alive and had been abducted, you bet the public would know about it because the number one priority would be the safety of the children.
But the kids were seen the day before. I know a lot of people didn't know that. I still see a lot of stuff online that the kids could have been missing for days. They were out of school for days, and they were seen in the Glasgow area on camera the day before this appearance in the afternoon.
So, after establishing this idea that he is very much aware of what's going on in the investigation, they're keeping him in the loop because, he's innocent. The next important thing that he thinks the public should know with relation to the investigation is about the children being seen the day before in the afternoon with him, Malaya and Meadow. Think about that. What's the motivation there? Why is it so important to him to share that information? Is that going to help find the children? What he's just said here demonstrates extremely clearly that finding the children isn't his number one priority here. That's not on the radar. The thing that is important to him, that he needs the public to know, is the fact that the children were seen the afternoon before they went missing. So people can forget these stories about the children having gone missing prior to that date, meaning basically he wants to once again clear his name. He wants to make sure that people understand that actually no, they didn't lie about when the children went missing because the children were sighted the day before. This again is all about covering his arse. It's got nothing to do with Jack and Lily. It's got nothing to do with sharing information to the public that might help find Jack and Lily. He's basically set himself up from the beginning as the advocate for Jack and Lily. He's here for them. He's speaking to the media for them because he wants them found. But when you hear statements like this, you know what the motivation is. The motivation is he is speaking to the media to cover his arse. It is far more important to him to be sharing this information with the public that demonstrates that the rumours that are going on around about him and or Malaya doing something to the children before the day that they were reported missing, it's important for him to make sure the public know that those rumours aren't true. That is far more important than giving any information that might help to find the children.
Where was that?
I don't know if I can say that, but it was near the Highland Square Mall.
Was it with you?
It was with me, Malaya, and Meadow, and Lily and Jack were there too.
And are the police aware of that?
The police were aware of that since.
Do they have that video?
Yes, they do. I also talked to my coworker in the parking lot as well, and he verified that with investigators as well. So, for all the speculation, they were gone days ahead of time, or they were seen the afternoon on camera before the disappearance.
So he's definitely latched onto this, I don't know if I can say that line, to give the impression that he is in on the investigation and that he's got all this extra information, but he's not allowed to share it. This is a classic manipulation tactic, but you would normally see it with a one-on-one situation. Basically, it's designed to manipulate a person to believe you by suggesting that you are giving them that additional trust that you may not give other people, that you are sharing your deepest secrets, so you are truly honest. So each time he says this, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, he's basically trying to give the impression that he's just being so very honest, that he's being so trusting here, that he's going to share this little glimmer of his soul, and that because he trusts you so much that he shares his secrets, he wouldn't possibly lie to you. You're pretty much guaranteed anytime someone says to you, "Ooh, I don't know if I can say that," that it's a lead-in to them telling you precisely that thing that they're saying they don't know if they can say. And of course he does precisely that. He offers up the exact location where they were caught on camera the day before the children went missing. Then he says something quite interesting. He points out that he spoke to a co-worker who verified that with investigators as well. And as he's saying that last part of it, that he verified it with investigators as well, as he says as well, you see the shoulders go up in a shrug. It's not often that we see this from him, but it appears to occur when he's trying to show contempt, or when he is showing contempt. And at the same time, you see the nostrils flare. Again, this is something that pisses him off. This conversation about the children possibly going missing before the day that they were reported. So here's the thing. They were seen on camera at the mall with the children. Him, Malaya, and all three children. We know this is fact. We've heard it from the Mounties. And yet here he is having to double down on that and say that he spoke to a co-worker who verified it with the investigators as well. And as he's talking about this additional verification, he's showing signs of contempt. So what's going on here? To me, this says he is being especially defensive. He knows that there's public scrutiny on him, and he wants to defend himself against that But in this instance, it's out of place because he doesn't need to defend himself when there's evidence on CCTV cameras. So him saying this here shows just how much he thinks he needs to defend himself. Is this because he knows he's guilty? Or is this because of a reaction to the public attention, the perception in the public that he is guilty? Or could it be a bit of both? And the next thing that he says, if I was having a conversation face to face with someone and I read the body language that I see in him during this statement, I would very quickly attempt to use language and body language to pacify this individual, to de-escalate the tension, and I would get the F out of there. Because what I am reading in his body language in that second part is a little bit alarming. He says, so for all the speculation that they were gone days ahead of time, and he doesn't finish what he's saying there. He doesn't actually provide the or part of his statement. And that to me suggests that the or part of the statement is possibly just a little bit too close to the truth, and his brain has stopped him from verbalising it. Now, as he's saying that, as he says speculation, you see his nostrils flare, and as he's saying days ahead of time, his eyes narrow. This whole part of the public speculation clearly really ticks him off. It makes him angry for some reason. Something about the kids possibly going missing beforehand makes him angry. Note also that he refers to them as being gone at this point. Not missing, not having disappeared, but gone. The speculation that they were gone days ahead of time. This is a bit like the Maddie Soto case, where Jen and Stefan constantly referred to Maddie as being gone. That suggestion that they are deceased. Especially when he says days ahead of time, meaning days ahead of the time when they actually were gone. It's a really subtle differentiation, but to me, it sounds very clearly like an admission that these children are deceased, and he knows that that is the case. Not only that, but they were gone on the day that they were reported missing. And he doubles down with, they were seen the afternoon on camera before the disappearance. Again, when he says the word disappearance, he closes his eyes. We're seeing a consistent pattern here. When he refers to them as disappearing, he closes his eyes. He's hiding something here. There is a truth here that he does not want to share, so he closes his eyes. And after he has done this, you see him open his eyes. He gets what appears to me to be a cold stare. You get the nostril flare again, and you get one eyebrow raising up, showing contempt. like I said, this is when I would backpedal my way out of there pretty damn quickly to make sure that I'm not caught in the crossfire. This is someone who is really, really not happy. And don't forget, this is his response to the question of what he wants the public to know, what he thinks they might not know, and what he thinks they should know. It's all about clearing his name. It's all about showing he's got an alibi, as opposed to providing any information that could perhaps encourage public to come forward with something that they might know that might actually help the investigation to progress. It's all about Daniel, not about Jack and Lily.
Why do you think the police are asking for video dating back, days before that?
Well, the reason for that is they want to see the traffic of the vehicles on the roads in the area, right? Maybe vehicles that were traveling that area a lot over the last few days prior to hand, or vehicles that weren't seen in the area, or vehicles that were seen in the area, like local people that are, making frequent trips past the house, or which it's all considered evidence. I mean, the more pictures and videos is the better.
Now, she asked him the question, basically, of why did they need video dating back several days? And to me, his response is quite telling. I think this is another cause of concern for him. He starts by saying they want to see the traffic, the vehicles on the road in the area, right? And as he says the vehicles on the road, he's shaking his head. And after he says right, you see him once again lick his lip. His tongue comes out, he licks his lip. This is a cause of anxiety for him. Something about them having video footage of the vehicles on that road is a cause of anxiety. Possibly something about the vehicles on the road in the lead up to when the children went missing. But he knows that they actually asked for footage for several days leading up to and several days after. So it could just be the thought in general of them having any footage of vehicles that are on that road. And then he goes on to say, maybe vehicles that were travelling that area a lot over the last few days, and he's shaking his head while he says that, prior to hand. Again, we get a bit of an odd bit of language going on here. When you get someone who's not speaking in full sentences, or someone whose sentences are a little bit skew-if, let's say, then that's something to pay attention to. He's definitely concerned over camera footage of vehicles travelling on that road. He even clenches his lips after saying that, and you hear an audible sigh before he goes on to say, that weren't seen in the area, and he opens his hands like, they weren't seen there. Or vehicles that were seen in the area. And there's an interesting thing that goes on here as he's talking about vehicles that were seen in the area. Before I get to that, I do want to back up, though, to when he says about vehicles that weren't seen in the area. because his body language says that he wishes there were vehicles that were seen in the area. This is the one and only time you see him expressing something with his hands. And I want to just remind you of a rumour that came out really early on in the piece and then went just as quickly. Kind of vanished around the time that we learned that they were looking at video footage of the road. And that was the rumour or the speculation that perhaps the children's bio-father had turned up and abducted them. And I can't help wondering, with his reaction with the open hands, if that is perhaps something that he may have put to investigators at some point in time to try and shift the blame over onto Cody. And he's been told, no, there's absolutely no evidence on camera of him having been in the area at any point in time. This is just speculation, of course, but it does appear from his body language that he's disappointed that the cameras prove that somebody wasn't in the area. But let's go on to what he was saying next, when he's talking about all vehicles that were seen in the area. And I would have loved to have seen a close-up of this rather than that side-on view from further back in the room. But it's still pretty clear. As he's saying vehicles that were seen in the area, he leans forward towards the reporter and you see his eyes widen. This is something that he wants her to make note of. The possibility that there could have been another vehicle in the area. And this makes sense because he's just expressed his concerns over people blaming him, over people looking at him. So the suggestion of another car being in the area takes the heat off him. So of course it is something that is positive for him, something that he wants to convince the interviewer of. So he's using body language that you would use when you are trying to convince someone of something. You know what? It could have been that car that they caught on camera, that nobody knows who it is. And you can see that he then latches onto this story because he keeps going. He says, making frequent trips past the house. And as he's saying frequent trips past the house, you can actually see his head moving like he's watching a car making trips past the house. It's not shaking of his head, it's a slower movement. It is tracking the movement of something. In his mind, this is a really good story. Someone has been making trips past the house, and this might be the person responsible. And then we get another or, an empty or. Making trips past the house or nothing. And then he really starts to trip over his words as he says, which are, it's all considered evidence. The more pics and videos is better. And he's shaking his head, he's fumbling his words. And you see him, once again, as he says about evidence and more pictures and videos, the tongue comes out and licks the lip. He's really anxious about the thought of there being more evidence and about the thought of there being videos and photos. This guy really shouldn't have done this interview because despite his very best efforts, he's actually made himself look worse.
They say they have hundreds of hours of video. Do you know if they've found anything on those videos?
I think it was up to 2 weeks ago, they had footage that they examined for evidence that was 8 kilometers diameter out from the house. So that's, I mean, that was after a month. That's how long it took to get footage and review it 8 kilometers out.
This is where we suddenly get helpful Daniel appear. He is doing his best to remember the information precisely. So he's explaining that for up to 2 weeks ago, they had footage that they had examined for evidence that was up to 8 kilometres out from the house. But this actually isn't answering her question. Her question is, they're saying they've got hundreds of hours of video. Does he know if there's anything on those videos? So instead, he's offering up facts. He doesn't say here if he knows there's anything on those videos or not. That's a mystery to us. He wants us instead to know that as of 2 weeks ago, they had like up to 8 kilometres out from the house worth of videos. And that they examined it for evidence, but he doesn't tell us if they got anything from it. But what we're seeing here again is another thing that Daniel has done frequently, and that is he is gaslighting the Mounties. He makes a point of saying, so that was after a month. That's how long it took to get footage and review it. It's one of his subtle jabs at the Mounties, saying that, oh, they're just not doing their job properly. That's why they can't find Lily and Jack. They don't know how to do their job. It took them a month to get all this video footage. And of course you see this little tweak of the corners of the mouth again when he mentions that it took him a month. It's like, I mean, that was after a month, and the corners of the mouth tweak up just a little bit. He's quite pleased with the fact that it took him a month to get hold of all that footage. Ironically though, while attempting to gaslight the Mounties, he is once again trying to give the impression that he is at the centre of the investigation, that they are keeping him appraised of everything that's going on, and this is all the knowledge he has from them, which is pretty much public knowledge, but hey, let's let him have his fantasy.
So
But what's on the video?
I don't know. I'm only limited by what they tell me.
Oh snap. She just called him out, and he realises it too. So after his big long explanation that had nothing to do with the question, she's repeated the question, so what's on the video? And you can hear in the tone of her voice, she's like, you just avoided answering the question, give me the answer please. And as she finishes saying that, you see his tongue come out and lick his lips again. This is stressful for him. This part of the conversation is causing anxiety. And he shakes his head as well. And then he starts to stumble over his words. I don't know. But at the same time, he's almost laughing about not knowing. But actually what he's doing here, I believe, is that he's actually showing contempt. And I'm not sure if he's showing contempt towards her for calling him out, or contempt towards the Mounties for not letting him know. But as he's saying, I don't know, you get him shrugging. But it's not both shoulders at once. It's one shoulder at a time. It's your asymmetrical body language, which usually shows contempt. Were he to be shrugging with both shoulders at once, then yes, I would believe that he's generally just saying, oh, I don't know. I haven't been told this. But because you get the shoulders going separate, seems to me he's definitely showing contempt here. He doesn't know. And it ticks him off. And like I said, whether this is directed at the Mounties or whether it is directed at the interviewer, I'm not entirely sure. It could be both. And he says, I'm only limited by what they tell me. Grammatically, this isn't really correct. So it's something that we need to pay attention to. I'm only limited by what they tell me. What's the real intention here of what he was trying to say? Because when you hear these sort of out of whack sentences, generally it means that the brain has sabotaged and the thing that you were trying to say has been sabotaged by what the brain is actually thinking. I think the significant thing here is limited, because that doesn't fit with the sentence. I'm only limited by what they tell me. I'm only aware of what they tell me, or I'm limited to only what they tell me. Two different things. He's expressing limitations here, I believe. I think that is what is significant, because that's the word that stands out to me in this sentence. He is limited. They are giving him limited information, and this is frustrating for him. This half laugh, he's not amused by the situation. He's showing contempt. He's not happy that he's not being kept in the loop.
How often are they in touch with you?
Investigators now, I'd say maybe once every 5 days. And usually I'm the one who calls or messages them.
So I wonder if they've actually told him, look, you can't be contacting us every day. You need to contact us maybe just once every 5 days or something. Because he's very, very specific there. It's not maybe once a week, or, not as much as before. It's a very specific, well, maybe once every 5 days. And he also points out here, usually I'm the one who calls or messages them. And as he is finishing saying that, you get one eyebrow raised. He's not so happy, by the looks of it, with the fact that they are not keeping him up to date with the investigation. He would like them to be contacting him and letting him know anytime there is something new.
And how has that changed over the course of the 6 weeks?
Well, from the beginning, it was almost daily, tapering off to where it's only like once every 5 days now.
So the question is, how's that changed over the course of the 6 weeks? And he points out that it's gone from, at the beginning, it was almost daily, and it's tapered off to where it's like once every 5 days now. And as he finishes saying that, he once again licks his lips. I think it is a cause of anxiety for him that he's not able to keep tabs on the investigation, that they're not giving him information on where things are at with the investigation.
And how do you feel about that?
It's good and bad. I mean, I like to talk to them in person about any little small details I come up with or anything I can try to bring to their attention which may help the investigation. So I don't get to see them often, so it's always over phone or messaging, and it's hard to really convey what you want to say when you're not in person. But then I also know the eye's not on me. The investigators don't see me as part of the disappearance.
So now we have Detective Daniel. He's saying that the reduced contact is hard because he likes to talk about small details that he comes up with or anything he can try to bring to their attention to help with the investigation. Note he says small details he comes up with. Things he comes up with. When I hear someone say things I come up with, to me that suggests things they've basically thought of in their head. Bit of creative story writing, should we say. Inventions. Wording it that way suggests to me that he's basically, over time, coming up with new details to give detectives that are going to steer them away from looking at him. But when someone does say, when they come up with something, it does basically imply a little bit of creative thinking, using your imagination. He's not referring to things that he suddenly remembered. He's talking about things that he came up with. Very different thing. And then he says anything that he can try to bring to their attention. This gives the impression that he's off doing his own special investigation and he's just sharing notes. This is what I discovered during my investigation. Let me bring this to your attention. Again, it's about controlling the narrative. Basically what he's saying here is that he likes to be able to have contact with detectives so he can try to control the narrative. And he points out that this is actually harder to do over the phone or by message than in person. And I was sitting there thinking, well, why? It could be that maybe he just doesn't like having to write emails or messages. But then, over the phone, you don't have to write, you can speak. So why is it easier in person? That's quite simple. If you are someone who is trying to manipulate the situation, if you are trying to control the narrative, then the best way to make sure that someone is actually believing what you say, to make sure that you're achieving your goal, is to do it in person. Because then not only can you use your body language to try and convince them, but you can read their body language at the same time and respond accordingly. And we've seen Daniel do this in his interviews, when he's being interviewed. And he doesn't seem to have done it so much in this one. But I believe that's because this interviewer, from the very beginning, established herself with body language that conveyed empathy. So from the beginning of this interview, she basically gave the impression that she believed everything he was saying. She was interested in everything he was saying. So he hasn't done that through this interview as much. But the other interviews, you see him, when he finishes saying something that is somewhat persuasive in nature, something that he wants people to believe, you see him look up and read the person who's interviewing him. Read their body language to see if they believe him. And that's why he would prefer to do it in person. Because that way he can read their body language, he can listen to what they're saying, and he can adapt his narrative accordingly. And then you get this comment that he basically thinks investigators aren't looking at him anymore. But he really struggles to get this out. The way he continuously pauses as he's saying this suggests to me that he doesn't actually believe it himself. So he says, but then I also know, pause, the eye's not on me, pause. The investigators don't. And you get another pause, and then when he starts to say see, you get the see. So he's even struggles with the see part of it. See me as, another pause, part of the, another pause, disappearance. Now, this time he doesn't completely shut his eyes when he says disappearance, but he does blink on disappearance. So I think definitely anytime he talks about disappearance, the children's disappearance, we're seeing his brain basically kicking in and saying, yeah, let's just shut the eyes down, or close the eyes or blink. We don't want to share any truths here. What I'm seeing in his body language, what I'm hearing here with these pauses, certainly make me still look at him as number one on my list. Especially when you consider the language. But then I also know the eye's not on me. Not really grammatically correct. It's a statement that he's struggling to get out. And then in the next part, the investigators don't see me as part of the disappearance. You get the pause before see me and another pause before disappearance. His brain's trying to stop him from saying see me. That to me says that actually he thinks the investigators are looking at him still. And again, the pause before disappearance. It's not something that he wants to discuss. And note again the odd language. He's not saying the detectives don't consider me a suspect. He's not saying they're no longer looking at me as being responsible for the children going missing. But they don't see me as part of the disappearance. It's an odd comment, and it's not really coming out with factual information. He's trying to convince his audience that the investigators don't suspect him at all, but essentially the cadence of what he's saying and the odd sentence structures raise huge red flags for me.
How do you know that?
Well, when you're going from daily to tapering off every 5 days, I mean, I already gave them everything on my phone. I'm the one who originally said, here, take my phone. We'll go through all my banking information. We'll go through all my stuff on my GPS from Google.
So this reporter has worked really, really hard to keep her tone non-confrontational throughout this interview, which is, pretty good effort. There was only that one time when she called him out because he basically didn't even answer her question. But in this instant, she's asked him, quite friendly, how do you know that? In terms of how does he know that they're not looking at him anymore? And if you actually watch his body language, he pretty much has a conniption over that question.
How do you know that?
So this time round, he not only licks his lips, but he also then runs his tongue around the inside of his mouth. At the same time, he's doing that self-soothing thing with his thumb, and you see both his legs jiggle. Given that usually you see very little in terms of body language from him, this to me says that this question is a cause of anxiety for him. And then we get the response. So, well, you're going from daily to tapering off to every 5 days. And then he opens and closes his mouth. He must be trying to figure out what to say next. Now, don't forget that he's actually just said that it's him doing the contact, making contact, not them making contact with him. And we heard on the dispatch audio quite early on that this was clearly a thing, him going to them for debriefing. So this actually has absolutely no bearing whatsoever on whether or not they are still focusing on him as a suspect. And clearly he knows this because this is an attempt to manipulate the audience. He's basically trying to convince them that, well, they're not looking at me because they're only talking to me once every 5 days or so now. Forgetting that he's already established the fact that he's the one making the contact. He wants the audience to forget that and believe that basically what he's telling them here is that they're barely contacting him now. And that makes it clear that they can't be looking at him too closely because otherwise they would be contacting him every day. So a very careful manipulation of his narrative there. And I think he must realise at that point in time that that's a pretty shallow excuse. So he decides to add more to be more convincing. And again, it's all from his perspective. I mean, I already gave them everything on my phone. And he's fidgeting with his hands the whole time. He's stressing out here because he's trying to come up with reasons. I'm the one who originally said, "Here, take my phone." And he's shaking his head while he's saying that and fidgeting with his hands. And we've heard him in another recent interview where he basically admitted that actually, no, they were the ones that requested the phones from him and Malaya. Apparently this guy thinks that his audience has the memory of a goldfish. And then he says, "We'll go through all my banking info. We'll go through all my stuff on my GPS from Google." And he's shaking his head while he's saying that. I mean, seriously, do we truly believe that he's the one that said, "Here, go through all my banking info. Here, go through all my GPS stuff from Google"? That's highly doubtful. He's basically trying to flip the narrative on its head and convince the audience that what would be standard protocol for investigators is actually all initiated by him. And that because he did do all these things, that proves that he's innocent.
And you were offering all that up right from the
Yeah, I
beginning.
offered everything
And why were you doing that?
to show them that I want to get the investigation moving. I know I have nothing to do with any of it.
Note his reaction when she asks him, "Why did you do all that?" He doesn't say, "Because I wanted to show that I was innocent." He says, "To show them that," and then he can't finish the sentence. Again, what I said at the start of this video, the brain is not hardwired to lie. He couldn't finish the sentence because it probably would have been a lie. Instead, he changes to, "I want to get the investigation moving." And he says, "I know I have nothing to do with any of it." So when he finally gets to the statement that he's trying to make, note how very non-specific it is. He at least manages to use "I" statements, but "I have nothing to do with any of it." He doesn't offer specifics. "I have nothing to do with Jack and Lily's disappearance. I have had no involvement in what happened to Jack and Lily." None of that. It's just, "I have nothing to do with any of it." It's the closest he can get because his brain won't let him go into specifics. You will note, not once in this interview has he mentioned their names, and even now he's not mentioning their names. Saying, "I know I have nothing to do with any of it," is about as vague as you can get, while at the same time trying to sound like you are actually saying something affirmative. It certainly holds far less credibility than saying, "I know I have nothing to do with Jack and Lily's disappearance."
A lot of speculation is, "You killed the kids." We'll come out and say it straight as it is.
A lot of speculation is, "You killed the kids." There's a lot of speculation as it is, and the whole time he's nodding his head. Once again, note he referred to them as the kids as opposed to Lily and Jack. He has not mentioned their names at all in this interview. He's depersonalising them. But to me, it's a little bit disturbing that the whole time that he's referring to people accusing him of killing the kids, that he's nodding his head.
What do you think when you read that?
It's a lot of nonsense, obviously. I know the truth. I didn't kill Lily and Jack. And I just think a lot of people online they're seeking drama, that's the main thing.
So straight after she asks him, what do you think when you read that? The reaction that we get from him is half grunt, half sigh. It's not a regular sigh. But, I mean, let's be realistic. Whether he was involved or not, to have those sort of accusations levelled at you are going to cause you anxiety and stress, regardless of whether or not they're truthful. And then comes the gaslighting. It's a lot of nonsense, obviously. Notice he uses obviously again, bit of persuasive language there just to hammer it in. He's putting it back on the people who are people in the public who are saying these things. It's just pure nonsense. He is dismissing it. And, let's call a spade here. This is a classic narcissist's move. Basically, to put it back on the other person and to suggest that what they're saying is due to a failure on their part, to suggest diminished mental capacity. It's nonsense. Obviously, it's nonsense. When you say that, you're basically implying, well, that person's a bit of an imbecile, aren't they? And he says, I know the truth. And he's shaking his head as he's saying it. Again, it makes it a little bit less believable. And he finally uses Jack and Lily's names. He says, I didn't kill Lily and Jack. But as he's saying that, he closes his eyes while he says it. He also lowers his head. So you get this corkscrew movement going on. As he's opening his eyes again, he's shaking his head and raising his head back up. Because now he needs to look at the interviewer to see if she's buying it. And then he goes back to gaslighting. I just think a lot of people online they're seeking drama. That's the main thing. And while he's saying that, the legs are going and his hands are actually gripping this time. He's really not happy about the situation. Like I said, regardless of whether he was involved or not, I think he would be a little bit unhappy. But he is basically gaslighting people. They're the ones with the problem. Clearly, they're deficient somehow. Now, they're seeking drama. It's got nothing to do with what they may actually see when they're watching his interviews, but rather a case of all these people online who are following Jack and Lily's case. Well, they're just imbeciles. They're just seeking drama. And look, okay, yeah, we do have the likes of Joseph Morris who are in this to create clickbait and make as much money as they can from creating BS stories. But it's not just YouTube creators who are looking at him and saying, there are red flags here, none of this adds up. There are so many people that have watched his interviews and gone, whoa, there is something seriously wrong here.
Everybody's allowed their own opinion, like I said before, but it's hard on the people that were actually there and missing the children.
So he makes a statement, everyone's allowed their own opinion. He's shaking his head at the same time, he's not too happy with this idea. And then he follows through with, but it's hard on the people that were actually there and missing the children. There's a few things to unpack in this. First of all, the actually there. He's pointing out that these people who are online and who are making accusations against him, they weren't there. They don't know what happened. But he is reminding everyone he was actually there. So was Malaya. They were both actually there when the children went missing. Now, he may not realise what he's doing here, but he's just reminding people that they are the only two people to focus on here. It appears highly unlikely now that the children did wander off into the woods. We've been told from officials that they don't believe the children were abducted. They've not gone back on that statement. Well, that leaves him and Malaya. And as he said, they were there when it happened. It's an attempt to make people feel guilty. You weren't there. You don't know what happened. The people that were there are missing the children. He's basically appealing for the emotional perspective of it. But it kind of misses a bit because he's not talking directly about himself now. He's talking about very generally about him and Malaya. So he's not saying that people having their opinions is hurting him or that it's hard on him. It's now hard on the people that were there and missing the children. He's not even saying here that it's him who's missing the children. It's become very depersonalised all of a sudden. And, you know, I would expect to hear at this point in time from someone who is innocent, someone who has no idea what happened to these children. I would expect to hear him talk about how painful it is to be accused of these things, how it's tearing him up inside, and how, you know, when it's so hard to be going through this nightmare of not knowing what happened to the children and not knowing where they are and not knowing if they're going to come back. And then to have your soul ripped out of you by these horrible, baseless accusations. And to be saying how incredibly painful it is. Because if you were accused of something like this, it would be painful. It would strike at the very core of you. But what we get instead is him basically gaslighting the people who are saying these things and then depersonalising it and saying it's hard on the people that were there. Well, it's going to be more than hard on the people that were there if they were innocent. It's going to be, it would gut you.
Still haven't got to see any of my kids, including Lily and Jack. And that's been really tough, going from a family of 7, including my other 2 kids that live in Halifax now. Going from a family of 7, in the blink of an eye, your family's ripped apart and you're left alone.
Okay, first of all, this guy is clearly paying attention to what people are saying about him. Because I'm sure I'm not the only one who mentioned, after one of his previous interviews, that he had referred to his own kids as opposed to Lily and Jack, which to me was a huge red flag showing that he actually didn't see them as family in any way. This time round, he includes them in. I'm not sure though if that's just because he's talking about going from a family of 7 to being alone. Because it sounds more dramatic to be able to say it's a family of 7 as opposed to a family of 5. But my question here is, how do his other children factor into this? Because theoretically, if he had no involvement in what happened to Jack and Lily, then why would anyone be preventing him from seeing his older children? There is something really, really significant here in terms of his access to his children. He's already mentioned that in terms of seeing Meadow, he has to have supervised access. And here he's also suggesting that he's being denied access to his other 2 children. So my question is why? Legally, if he had no involvement in the disappearance of Lily and Jack, if nobody was looking at him in terms of his ability to be around his own children and still ensure their safety, then no one could stop him from seeing his children. There has to be a reason why he's being denied access. So that brings us to the end of this interview with Daniel. I actually think it was extremely revealing, and unfortunately it didn't make me change my mind about him. I'm still very much focused on him with regards to the disappearance of these 2 children. So on that note, as you can probably hear from the snoring chihuahua behind me, that's a good time for me to finish. So thanks for listening. If you are new to my channel, please do subscribe. Also, please hit the like button. YouTube loves that. It gets my videos back there out into the algorithm. It's one of the best things you can do to help my channel. And also please leave a comment below. Thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.